Now it's time to talk about water. In this session, we'll hear from members of the Valuing Water Finance Task Force, who will talk about how they're tackling water risks, how financial institutions are responding to the system-based challenges presented by water scarcity and pollution, and how they're identifying the strategies, tools, and metrics to reduce water insecurity. We'll hear from Sophia Chang of Cathay Financial Holdings in Taiwan, Brian Rice of CalSTRS, and Ceres' own Water Program Director, Kirsten James. But first, we'll take a trip around the world in a short video featuring task force members from Australia, Sweden, the Netherlands, the UK, and the US.
As a global citizen, I will say that I value water because it is the lifeblood of all people, animals, and plants. I would just challenge anyone to imagine our communities and economies without water, and imagine what our lives would be without this scarce, precious resource. Well, California is no stranger to water challenges by any means. We are in the middle of another dry winter, which may mean that we are headed into another multi-year drought. And unfortunately, we also may be looking at several multi-year droughts in the future due to changing temperatures.
Australia is the driest continent on Earth. We have been dealing with water issues ranging from extreme drought to flooding for many, many years now. And these aspects have impacted our investment portfolio. About a year ago, Australia had some of the worst bushfires ever on record. These fires burnt out an area equal to the size of England. These fires made people homeless, people lost their businesses, and it impacted the local society in general. And this was caused from the many years of drought that Australia went through and is still going through. And this is why the topic of water is extremely important to us as investors, but to us as Australians in society in general. We started assessing climate risk back in 2011. We started assessing our 5 largest infrastructure assets that were located around Australia, and this included impacts of water or lack of water on the asset. We recently had our listed equities portfolio assessed for physical impact risks, and this included water. And interestingly, for our Aussie equities portfolio, it found that it was most exposed to either water stress, droughts, or being exposed to typhoons and hurricanes within the supply chain in Southeast Asia.
Well, with regards to the water issues in the UK, we actually don't have a great shortage of water on average. What we have is water at the wrong time. And just in the month of December here locally, we experienced some very, very serious flooding in our area. So where I am, I'm only 70 miles north of London, and we are on a river, which is actually the 4th longest river in the UK, the Great River Ouse. And it flooded and burst the banks, and it was a 1 in 22 year event. So what we find is that there is plenty of water, but it's all at the wrong time when we get it.
Yeah, you could ask yourself, why does an investor care so much about water? Well, there's a bit of history there, Netherlands and water go together pretty well. So if you're a big Dutch pension fund, water comes to the fore pretty quickly. It's also our beneficiaries that care about water. They see drinking water, clean drinking water, as the best medicine to a lot of the public health issues they're worried about. COVID almost, proved that point, right? Especially earlier in the epidemic, when it was all about social distancing and hand washing and etc. It relates very closely to water. But perhaps there's another reason. It's not just history, and it's not just a push from our beneficiaries. It's also that if you're big enough as an investor, and we manage about 250 billion euros, water is that externality that you can't run away from. It's going to hit you one way or the other. We invest in 20 plus asset classes, and quite a few of them actually do have an exposure to water risk. We invest globally. So yeah, you can kind of overcome this issue in one place, but you can't overcome it in every place. So you need to take this seriously for what it is. It's a systemic risk.
Our board endorsed the ambitions of the Sustainable Development Goals as a way of achieving real-world outcomes in society. And we have identified water as one of those key issues that we actually want to be intentional about our impact. As part of this endorsement, we've also developed a water statement, which explains how we as investors see those risks and how we try to address them. So we do this in 3 ways. The first one is through mobilizing capital. We see the challenges faced by industries that depend on water as investment opportunities. Technologies and business models that solve global problems around water and sanitation are likely to see their markets grow. And therefore, there's going to be a need for capital. We also see an opportunity, for example, in infrastructure upgrades and ways of making water distribution more efficient. So that's one of the ways in which we are trying to address issues. The second one is as stewards of capital. And this has to do a lot with how we, as active owners, engage with companies, not only when water is a material issue for them, but also we want them to think of how they are impacting the issue of water, even if it's not the most material thing in their business models. And thirdly, we see that there's a very important role of advocating and collaborating with like-minded organizations.
And we were invited and decided to join forces with Ceres and the FAIR Global Investor Engagement on meat sourcing. And it was seeking to address water risk in fast food supply chains. This is important to LAPFF on the basis that we're not going to make changes on our own, and we don't have all the answers. But by reaching out and having that dialogue with like-minded organisations, we can actually bring a fairer outcome in discussing with companies.
We need to understand how industries are exposed to water consumption, whether there's limitations or regulations coming in, which are changing the way they can operate. We need to understand whatever the regions that our companies, our clients are operating in, our investments are operating in, whatever they're exposed, whatever there's going to be new regulations or new requirements in respect to access to water. So we know that all these things are underway, and we're basically trying to identify where to look and how to monitor those exposures.
Working in conjunction with the task force, we think that's going to provide important resources and knowledge and data and collaborative efforts and opportunities for us to advance this agenda. The water agenda is becoming a key part of our corporate engagement program.
As a founding member of the Valuing Water Finance Task Force, obviously I value water and its stewardship. And I really am excited about the prospect of building out the resources and the tools and the leadership necessary to align company goals with economic and environmental imperatives. So I hope the task force will provide investors and companies with new tools to move towards uniform disclosure of these risks to help investors actually measure and manage the water risk in our portfolios.
Yeah, I'm happy to be part of the Valuing Water Finance Task Force, which is a recent initiative led by Ceres and joined by quite a few institutional investors, NGOs, and government agencies, which is trying to convert this economic case for water security, which we all know, to the financial case for water security. And if indeed we get better at that, articulating what's in it for companies, what's in it for investors, as a material risk to our portfolios, or indeed as a big investment opportunity.
At HESTA, we're big believers of the Active Ownership 2.0 framework outlined by the Principles for Responsible Investment. This framework talks about the importance of focusing on system-level risks and targeting achieving real-world outcomes as opposed to just focusing on processes. Finally, we acknowledge that in order to have that change at the system level, we need to do it in a collaborative way. And therefore, we think that the Valuing Water Finance Task Force actually achieves this. It operates at the system level. It enables that collaboration between investors, and it's really focused in achieving positive outcomes. This is why I invite you all to join this initiative.
We are hoping the task force will contribute to what can be understood as a best practice in this area and contribute more broadly to pushing water risk up the agenda within the investor and the business and, importantly, the political space. I am a founding member of the Valuing Water Finance Task Force, organised by Ceres. I am excited to be part of the team building the business case for water stewardship.
We feel that this initiative will help build the necessary resources, tools, and leadership that is needed to change the way that we look at water, that we use water, and that we're stewards of water. I invite you to join us in this effort. If you have an interest in water, if you have knowledge or skills on this topic, please join this initiative.
I'm a member of the Valuing Water Task Force simply because there's so much to learn and there's so many interesting people which I can learn from. So I think that many of the issues, and I think I also see that to some extent in the group, a lot of these issues are a combination of global and regional issues, and that means that when you have a number of regional players from across the world getting together and kind of approaching this from different angles, different perspectives, maybe even different industries, different experiences, you learn so much. And alongside that you're learning, you might also be capable of contributing. And looking at life in itself, that's what life is about, isn't it? I mean, you learn and you contribute, and when you do that, you move forward.
Well, our colleagues from the Valuing Water Finance Task Force have set the stage so well for our session and for this conversation. My name is Kirsten James, and I'm the director of the water program at Ceres. We now want to take the opportunity to dive in just a little bit more deeply and have a conversation with two of our Valuing Water Finance Task Force members about what their institutions are doing and plan to do to better value water. So I'm so pleased to be joined by Sophia Chang, Chief Investment Officer for Cathay Financial Holdings, and Brian Rice, Portfolio Manager at CalSTRS. And first, just to provide a little context. So Ceres, in partnership with the government of the Netherlands, launched the Valuing Water Finance Task Force a year ago at the Ceres 2020 conference. Ceres has worked on the issue of water risk for over a decade, but the work takes us to the next level with the Valuing Water Finance Task Force in terms of leadership and ambition. Global economic systems have inappropriately treated water as if it is infinite and of little value. And this in turn has led to massive waste and misuse of the resource, imperiling ecosystems, human health, and long-term economic sustainability. In steps the Valuing Water Finance Task Force, a group of leading asset owners and banks formed to help scale action on water risk. And specifically, the group seeks to drive corporate action on water-related financial risks. So in this segment, we'll learn a little bit more about how Brian and Sophia's institutions are approaching water risk and why they joined the Valuing Water Finance Task Force. So Sophia and Brian, we've all seen the staggering statistics on the current trajectory. By 2030, we're facing huge shortfalls in water supply, upwards of 56% by some estimates. Water bodies are seriously impaired around the globe. Over 1 billion people worldwide lack access to safe drinking water, and I could go on and on. And as a result, water risks are playing out in real time. So I'd like to first turn to you, Sophia, to help us further characterize the crisis we are facing. Our task force represents countries and continents from around the globe. You're based in Taiwan. Can you share and tell us a little bit more about the water issues that you're experiencing in your part of the world?
Taiwan is a small island in Asia, and it's surrounding with China, Japan, Korea, and some other Southeast Asian countries. Toward the west side of the Pacific Ocean. So it's usually people think Taiwan should have abundant water. But according to the United Nations, Taiwan ranked number 18 in water scarcity. And each year we have about 900 million tons of water, of which we only capture about 20%. Because this island has very deep mountains, and with such small island, we have 23 million population. Taiwan is also very famous by its manufacturing, able to produce many, like your iPhones. And I think Taiwan contributes to close to 70% of the electric vehicles, the key components, and many other things. So being an important member of the global supply chain, the manufacturing industry also uses a lot of water. So because of natural geography shape, it's hard to capture water. And in fact, just on the rainfall itself and the usage water, the per capita water usage is only about 1/6 of the global average. And this island depends heavily on rainfalls. So we have springfall, we have typhoons, and therefore every year we have a local slang saying that when you pray to God, you pray smooth water and smooth wind. We need typhoon, but if it gets too much, we have flood. But in the past 3 years, we are seeing typhoon, the rainfall pattern has changed a lot. It became even more uncertain. And in 2020, the end of the year, the government has to suspend some of the agriculture activities by providing subsidies to farmers because the water was quite scarce. So this is part of a global climate change situation where toward the end of century, you will be seeing more heat, extreme cold, drought, flood. Everything you talk about, I think probably more than half they will happen in Taiwan. So the government now is very serious about thinking how to improve the country's climate resilience. We have less aggressive greenhouse gas emission reduction target in Taiwan compared with, say, Japan, Korea, China. They are setting net zero. But in this year, we very clearly seeing government is working on that potential research on path to net zero. And as part of this climate impact, water scarcity, how to use water, how to preserve water will be a very important issue for this country. And this is not just in Taiwan. In Asia, you can see many countries, they will be very threatened by sea level increase. They will also be threatened by flood, by drought as well. And as investor, I think we can play a very important role on this because we do have investment position that are water heavy, that are CO2 heavy. And I'm very happy to see the engagement activities we have participated. We are creating some impact to corporates.
Great, thank you for that summary. And I think a lot of the challenges that you are facing in Taiwan really ring true as you describe them to where I sit in California and where I know, Brian, you sit as well, although we're at different parts of the state. I'm down south and you're up north. But Brian, can you reflect on what Sophia has shared and how you're seeing in California maybe similar to what she shared or different?
Sure, Kirsten. And first, let me thank you for the opportunity to be part of this conversation. I believe I can definitely relate to the issues that Sophia outlined that Taiwan is facing as a resident of California. California is a place that is experiencing water stress and water risk in many ways. A lot of our water risk in California comes from issues like a growing population, climate change and changing weather patterns, demands on water resources from agricultural production. I mean, wildfires are a huge problem now in California, and that leads to a lot of water pollution, a lot of water issues. It might be surprising to some to know that safe and affordable drinking water is an issue in California. I've heard the estimates of maybe 1 million people that don't have access to safe water. I think the bottom line is that companies and investors need to play stronger leadership roles around water issues. I don't think there's a company in existence that can survive without water, and it's important that they manage it and that we manage their management as investors in these companies.
Great, I couldn't agree more. And yeah, water is definitely top of mind for us in California. In fact, I was just reading in the LA Times earlier this week that we're going to need what they called a miracle for Southern California to reach our needed rainfall totals. So hopefully we get that miracle, but it's always a precarious situation here in California. So coming back to you, Brian, as an asset owner, your portfolio obviously touches many geographies beyond California and California as well. But can you tell us a little bit more about your role and what CalSTRS is doing to address water risk?
Sure. So I'm a portfolio manager here at CalSTRS, and I'm in the Sustainable Investment Group. And in this role, I've been leading our environmental focused stewardship and engagement efforts, principally talking to companies around issues like climate change and the low carbon transition, waste management, and certainly water usage and water risk management. I've been at CalSTRS for 18 years now and been engaging companies for quite a long time on behalf of CalSTRS. I've certainly in that time seen a growing awareness and action, particularly internally, around how we look at water and how we make decisions relative to water. I think, obviously we're part of the Ceres Investor Water Hub and have been for a number of years, and we sit on the advisory committee. So I think that demonstrates a commitment. We're constantly working to embed water into our engagements with our portfolio companies, certainly utilizing tools like the Ceres Feeding Ourselves Thirsty, the benchmarking report around food companies, utilizing resources like that when we're engaging these companies on environmental issues, engaging other sectors around water issues. We've been pretty busy in the beverage companies, apparel companies, and a lot of engagement in utility companies, and then the hydraulic fracturing and all the water use that goes on in that regard. I think we're making good progress. I think we recognize, though, that we need to do more. The water crisis and the resulting risk, it's here and it's now, and we need to take bold action now.
Couldn't agree more. And it's great to hear that you're making some good inroads, and hopefully together we'll be able to do more. So Sophia, turning to you, how about you? What is CAFE really focused on now in terms of water risk?
It was very good to listen to what Brian had said. When we started our responsible investment and ESG journey, organization like yourself is who we learn from. And we also learn at the global asset owners, how they do the whole ESG process. The more you do ESG, you will find not just about disclosure, greenhouse gas emission. When we think about longer term and how the environment can be sustainable, water is such an important issue. And as I mentioned, not just the rainfall, the use of water in Taiwan can be affected. We have a very large portfolio. Cathay Financial Holdings is the largest financial group in Taiwan. We manage about $300 billion of assets. So naturally, we have to think about long-term sustainability of our portfolio. We do invest globally, roughly 60% overseas. So if there are any engagement activity we can participate, we'll also be honored to join. Within Taiwan, given the size of our business, we also run a large bank, one of the largest asset managers in Taiwan. We are always an important partner to the government when we think about long-term trend. So not just on the investment return, what influence can we bring? And as I mentioned earlier, Taiwan faced water scarcity and uncertainty, but at the meantime, the water price in Taiwan is so low. If you look at the household spending on water versus GDP, it's only 0.16%. It's compared to the world's, the IWA member is 1.02%, so low. It has been 26 years. The country has not raised its water price. And as a result, people are not using water as efficient as they should. And even today, when we face the water uncertainty. So we think as an investor, beyond climate change initiative, if we can help the corporate to understand what they can make an impact to the country, if they manage water resource, if they recycle, reuse water better. If we all think about how Taiwan can preserve water together, 80% of the water leak out, evaporated, or goes straight to the ocean. But if you see Singapore, they don't need to buy water from anyone anymore. So there are new technology, it's just a matter of commitment. And so we do have portfolio about 22% of Cathay Life portfolio is actually heavy in water consumption. So they will include some fossil companies and manufacturing company, and even some company who assemble your iPhone or who do the semiconductor industry. They are all quite heavy in water usage. So that's why it is important when we participate in this global initiative, we can learn the knowledge, we can plan one by one each year, do a bit more. And by learning from peers, I really want to make a good sample in Asia, not just in Taiwan. And in the meantime, we can think about how to improve the overall country resilience. And bottom line is no sustainable corporate, no sustainable investments. So only if we can bring our knowledge and work with all our stakeholders, then we can really enjoy long-term performance. So that's a philosophy behind why we are very active in this initiative.
Yeah, no, that philosophy really resonates. Those are some great points. Thank you. We obviously need a large tent of partners to join us on this journey in order to see the progress necessary to really match the scale of the huge water crisis that we're facing. So reflecting on the work of the task force and what it means for you to be part of this Valuing Water Finance initiative, can you just share with us some of your thoughts on what this means to you and why your peers should join us on this journey? Brian, first to you.
Sure. Yeah, I think overall that it's extremely critical that the investment community, the financial sector, takes water risk more seriously and accounts for the true value of water. Going back to what I said before about the value proposition. I mean, water is an incredibly unique resource. It underpins all the drivers of economic growth, whether that's food production, energy generation, industrial activities, human health, political stability. I think this initiative is building the resources, the tools, the leadership that's necessary to change the way the private sector sees water. So that at the end of the day, we can help to drive companies to systemically change the way they look at water across their businesses. I think we can and need to design some sort of unified investor initiative to broadly engage companies on water risk management, similar to what we're seeing with the Climate Action 100 Plus, which has been tremendously successful around managing climate change risk. I'm certainly proud to be part of this work.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. It's a high ambition, but with thinking about where this could head in terms of our experiences with CA 100 Plus, I think it's really exciting, of where this could grow and the impact that we could create from this effort and the resulting engagement. So really exciting. Sophia, how about you? Any thoughts to that end?
Oh, that's easy. There are so many reasons people should join this initiative. We have been talking about ESG integration, climate change. You think about climate risk mitigation, you can reduce CO2, but you have to think about structurally. Water is a very important issue. And as Brian just mentioned, you look at initiative and Climate Action 100 Plus, we do benefit from that. When we engage with companies, you will be amazed that they want to do good and they want to survive long. It's just they need information to learn from. And today, as financial institution, we are so honored. We manage tons of assets for the world. So naturally, we are empowered with this opportunity that we can influence people. So I can't see any reason that we don't be part of this meaningful initiative. And I try to get our peers to join as well. And you see, with common commitment, common efforts together, we can really find the good research. And without proper research data information, we cannot have the proper tool to engage corporates. So yes.
Terrific. Well, that's a great note to end on. We look forward to working with all of you and just want to thank you both for joining this session and really appreciated your insights and perspectives. And thank you for all your leadership and to those members of the Valuing Water Finance Task Force who joined us today as well. So to the audience, if this conversation leaves you wanting to know how you can do more and join this effort, there are a number of ways you can get involved. So first, immediately after this session, we'll be hosting a Join the Conversation on water, and you can join us and ask questions, talk with colleagues about water and water risk in real time. And we'll have some fun trivia and other breakouts where you can network with some of your colleagues. If you're particularly interested in getting involved in the Valuing Water Finance Initiative, there's several working groups that we're forming, and you can get involved that way. So we'll share out some links and other information on ways to get involved. And then finally, there's a number of great tools and resources on Ceres' website. For example, for investors, we have our Investor Water Toolkit, which is a comprehensive resource to evaluate and act on water risks in investment portfolios. For companies, we have our Ceres Roadmap 2030, which has an extensive section on working towards net zero water impacts, and many more resources as well. So again, thank you all so much for joining us today. And thank you so much to Sophia and Brian for being with us today. Take care.